Thank you.
Thanks, Faiza, and good morning, everyone. Really grateful you could all join. Now, although it's workshop, I've put a slides, about 30 odd slides, and I'm hoping this will be very interactive things. Thanks, Faiza, for a brief introduction. Things have changed a little bit about myself, so I'll just share the slide. Just give me a second. So Faiza, could you please confirm that you can see the slide in the presentation mode?
Yes, we can.
Brilliant. So yeah, things have changed a little bit. So since last October, I've moved to the university job, and I'm a clinical associate professor under a institute called LEARN, which is part of University of Leeds, and I'm now doing 50% research and 50% clinical. And the reason, I suppose, both in HRC and BRC, I've got this research inclusion role is over last decade or so, I've been very passionately working around how to sort of bridge the gap and have equity in healthcare access to predominantly in my own area, which is kidney disease. And I'm afraid one of the disclaimers is you will end up learning a lot about kidney health inequalities today in my talk. But the idea is just to really give some examples of the journey, but also what we are trying to do. And some of that will resonate with you. Some of that you might want to adapt, and others, during the discussion, hopefully I'll learn a lot from you. So currently, I've got quite a lot of equity hat, and both within the NIHR infrastructure, but also wider region in Yorkshire and Humber Kidney Network, and you'll learn in a minute what that means. So this is what I sort of thought I'll cover. This might be very basic to some of the experts in the room. I know you all been working similar to me over a decade or more in this space, so apologies, but I'll start very simple and then build up on things. I've got some questions, which, if that's okay, I won't be able to see you because I don't have multiple screen, but hopefully, Faiza, you could moderate that when the questions are on the slides, please. So for me, at a personal level, coming from a very humble background, equity is quite easy to understand. I've been in UK now about 24 years, pretty much integrated in the system, but actually in my early childhood and later as an adult, I've experienced myself a lot of inequalities in the journey. The key essence is the way to describe is it's part of day-to-day life for majority of population across the world. The way it is described is it's avoidable, it can be corrected, and often it is an unfair thing that number of the global population that goes through this process that then leads to what we call as health inequalities. Now, working as a doctor in NHS, what I realized is 20% of the outcome is due to the medical care. The 80% of the health inequality is usually structural, access to the institute, etc., but not direct medical care. So although my initial journey has been focusing a lot about the medical care, what I understood when I undertook Health Equity Fellowship in West Yorkshire is a lot more complex. Not only structural institute that are within our area, but policies may be also contributing to the health inequalities, and a lot more are not in our direct control. Some of them may be under our influence, but actually in the space where we're working within NHS or NIHR, a lot of this may not be within our remit or control, because those are much bigger political and structural issues. So we might not be able to solve all the things that contribute to these unfair, avoidable differences, but there are things that we could do within our remit. We often, this is my favorite slide to represent what the differences between equality and equity. Often we see those, step ladder sort of, cartoon where somebody's watching a football game or a cricket game. But to me, that slide, although often used, always gives an impression that you need to give more to certain group of people. The question is not about giving more to certain group of people. I think we need to really, because that gives almost an impression that we don't have enough resource. How can we give more resource to actually help bridge that gap? This is why I like this particular slide, where you can see there are 4 individuals there: a disabled, a man, a female, and a young child. If you treat everybody equal because you are resource constrained, you're not going to get each of this individual from A to B in the same time. Certainly, the disabled person, there's no chance is going to ride that cycle. So treating equally isn't helping all. Treating people with equity means you're going to be tailoring the needs for the disabled person, for that child, and for that female. So that is what we need to be thinking about, is tailoring the resources for the needs so that we can move people from A to B, whether that's in the technology space research, whether it's health outcome, or whatever that be. So hence I like this slide more than the other one that almost feels like we have to do more. It's not about doing more, it's about doing what is required. Again, I don't think I need to tell the audience why focusing on equity is really important for our country, for global health, because it's going to reduce that inequalities. And what's the cost of inequalities for UK? The estimate is £150 billion a year. That's actually same budget that NHS gets. So that's how much it's costing to the taxpayer. About a third of that is actually direct NHS cost to mitigate the health inequality and poor health status of those individuals. And about £100 billion is actually loss of economy, loss of productivity, loss of life expectancy. So that's a huge amount of money that we could get it back into the system if we all work towards, bridging the gap of that inequity. Of course, within our HRC, we work with a lot of industries for them to get funding. Most of the funders now have mandated that tokenistic PPIE or tokenistic inclusive approach is no more acceptable. So we need to really make a very strong case that the research that we're doing is not for few, but actually for all, but not only for all in UK, but actually the research we're doing, we hopefully can actually take that to the global south or global majority, because we need to be have that place in the world where we can make differences to all. And as a clinician and a scientist, I think for me, the validity of that approach is really important, because I don't really try and do things for a certain group of individuals, but actually the one that it helps. And for the industry, I guess the market access is really important. I was reading that in the global health industry, UK is only single digit. We got much bigger markets. So if we are going to be working with a technology, we need to think about actually, can we, increase our economic activity? So hence inclusivity, it's not a hobby anymore. It's actually a real need at all angles. So at this point, I'll just stop a little bit. I can't see you, but would you want to answer these questions from wherever you are? So a lot of colleagues are from HRC, but I can see the CRF colleagues are here and BRC colleagues are here as well. So what do you think over the years, what's the strongest sort of inclusion, and where do you see things are still aspirational? Now, the reason I use this word is, my colleague often say, these are all very good. These are all very aspirational. We can't operationalize X, Y, Z. Does anybody want to shout out on this question? I'll pause for a minute or two. what do you think? I can only see a few people, so I'll pick up. Alyssa, what do you think? Aspirational and operational, what's your strongest strength in the area you work? Would you like to share? Because it's all about really learning from each other.
Did you say my name?
Yeah.
Did you? Okay.
Just picking up on you.
No, absolutely. I suppose aspirational, we really want to get lots of diverse participants recruited, which is something that we know is so important, because we need that data. That's the primary data that looks at all of these health outcomes. However, we know how difficult it is to recruit individuals generally. So giving the space, giving the time, reaching into the right different groups, and building that kind of trust into clinical trials and clinical research is something that is obviously so important, and I don't think it is just aspirational. I think it's essential, but trying to work out the operational requirements for that is something that I think we really need to do. We perhaps are a little bit better at trying to get diverse voices in patient and public involvement, because there's a smaller number you're trying to reach. You can be a little bit more targeted. You can specifically seek individuals from that area or diverse groups. Not saying it's completely done, but when you're looking at large recruitment samples and tight deadlines, lots of things like that, getting those people through the door and having a representative sample in your recruitment targets, I think, is something that needs a lot of work and a lot of effort in to try and get to.
Thank you. I think what you just mentioned probably resonates to all of us, really. I think we and again, colleagues like Amy, etc., who've been working really hard on PPI, we sort of feel that we cracked that, haven't we, in terms of getting people on the table and as diverse voice as we can. But how do we take that voice into actually the real recruitment and real impact is still that missing gap. Anybody else want to share their strongest strength apart from the PPIE, which I think we are all doing better over the years. It was a tough journey, but I think we believe, but certainly we can see that is certainly improving across the domain. Anybody else? Yes, Chris, did you want to say something? You just unmuted yourself. No? Okay, so that was my first sort of question. I'm just going to go back to the presentation. Okay. So this is some of the slides I copied from you, Elsa, very kindly from HRC Network. That the question, so I'm going to present a few slides from HRC, but also from BRC and CRF as the next few slides, just to really get us thinking what we are all thinking are very similar, really. So these are the question that you posed to the wider network, didn't you, about the confidence level, what are the need in terms of not only improving the awareness, but actually take from ideas into something substantial in terms of work themes that we are doing. I mean, I've not seen the full report, but these are some of the slides that you talked through. And the real need and common themes that emerged in the HRC network was about how do we sell ourselves so we are actually successful in grant applications. So embedding those within our grant writing, because at the end of the day, every penny we got from NIHR, we translate that as a minimum to 8. Some of us might do 16 or 24, but each pound we got, we want to translate that into 8 or more. And for that, we do need to really prove ourselves that we are inclusive. Often what I find is the grant application, even the HRC network, for example, our own HRC in Leeds, we haven't got a budget actually to undertake activity of research inclusion. We do have a PPIE budget, but that's not the same thing when it comes to research inclusion activity or a project or piloting. So what that meant is we then have to really, and even working in the BRC as research inclusion co-lead, I find exactly the same position, that we got some nominal time to lead the conversation, but actually when it comes to pilot something, we don't have any budget in our grant application. So I think it's really important, as highlighted here, that we need to think more about it. I think the East Midlands ARC, I really like them. Their full infrastructure budget, 5% of the budget is about that research inclusion. So I wonder if anybody else within the call have put that percentage of the total grant into research inclusion, not PPIE, but actually in terms of research inclusion activity. And that I feel is one of the challenge that we have. And the second thing that came was engaging with the communities, and it's all about developing skills. Now, colleagues like Amy, of course, have worked through the years in partnership, so they may be able to share a little more on the skills. I'll share you some of the things that I've been working on marginalized or historically underrepresented colleague. And I suppose the third theme in terms of my own reflection was, what is this EDI? And particularly with the Trump coming in, a lot of colleagues are on the fence. They are worried. They're afraid to even use this as widely as they could. So quite a lot of us now are focusing on inclusion rather than the whole EDI, because it's a bit of a big term. And the other key need from this survey from HRC Network was about sharing those training case studies and documents that we have. So I think we are pretty much in that process, isn't it? Do you want to make any comment? Because I've, of course, lifted and shifted this slides from yourself, Alicia, sorry.
No, I think they're really good points. Yeah, as the network, we're trying to learn from each other and those that have got a little bit further along with some areas of training, and like, it's interesting what you say about definitions and making sure that we're all aligned in that. We talked last time about capturing demographics and whether that's something we wanted to do across the network and across the HRCs. But yeah, there's obviously a lot of work still to be done, but the training that you're able to offer, if we can share that widely, hopefully that will be something that individuals that haven't got that budget built in can do. But yes, having it at the forefront, to have it just as you would consider PPIE funding, to have that research inclusion budget, and also share a little bit about what that might look like, because I think people might still need some ideas about what they're actually costing for to encourage research inclusion.
That's very true, actually, because if we have some ideas, then we can put in the grant application rather than scrambling afterwards. It's almost an afterthought, really. I think the PPIE budget we've sorted out quite well in various infrastructure. I think the gap is the equity. Amy.
I think those points are really important, and I think probably that connection as well between the first one and the final one, and sort of really unpicking what is meant by research inclusion, because I think a lot in terms of grant applications, a lot of that can be focused on, okay, how do we involve people, but then also there's the factors about sort of like thinking about representation within your team, sort of like training, particularly for early career researchers in that area as well. So I feel like we've probably got quite a good steer from PPI about research inclusion and how to do that, but I don't think we necessarily have the steer about the other areas and what they're looking for in those points.
Thank you, Amy. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Let me just go back to the slides. Yep. Now, thank you. So a lot of efforts I think we're all doing, and hopefully one in IHR, when we come, this will be easier. Within Leeds, the HRC, PRC, and CRF, we are sort of one EDI working group. So hopefully that learning and sharing will be much easier and at pace. So the next few slides, I'm going to just share one of the activity undertaken and published in BMJ within last year. So what this group undertook was they looked at content analysis. So they looked at all the PRCs and all CRF EDI strategy, and they did a bit of a mapping of EDI priorities, how well they're articulated, and what do they think about operationalization. What was quite interesting is BRC and CRF, there were some differences in terms of maturity, as suggested here. BRC, within their content analysis and qualitative work, they felt that they had much more comprehensive and measurable strategies as compared to CRF. And then what this group did was they then shared some logic model, which is really helpful and a simplistic thing. So what I'll do over the next few slides is just take you through those logic model and give some examples of what I've been involved in a HRC level. So this was one of their first logic model, which is about development and delivery of research. On all of the three logic models that they proposed, really, that are linking between the objectives, activities, and impact. So that's what they like to talk about. And at the end of the day, what we want really is impact studies and not just activities. We just don't want the numbers as how many people we engage or what we did, but so what is the question. And you will see that the objectives, pretty much whether it's BRC, CRF, or HRC, we all want to embed and promote EDI project, so inclusivity project. We already heard that we want to mitigate areas of underrepresentation, and we want to have a diverse PPIE. Now I'll come to that diversity in a minute, because I don't think, although we've done good work on PPIE, I feel they're not diverse enough, and I'll tell you why in a minute. And these are the action plan that they all say, whether it's CRF or BRC, that they want to embed EDI in each stages of it. They want to develop methods of outreach, and not just staying within the infrastructure or NHS, but actually going outwards. And how do they know that they have actually met the objectives? You could see in the bottom box is what they really are going to suggest that we should all be capturing. We need to focus on inequalities. We need to work with communities. And as you know, NIHR has now stopped using PPIE. They're going to use the word working with communities. So no longer just, a few groups of individuals in PPIE is enough. What we need to now do is to show that we are working with communities, not just a small group of people. And as we already sort of touched base, the key thing is at the end is the proportion of research participant. Are they well represented? But not only well represented, are they co-produced with the patients? So these are sort of one of the logic model on research development and delivery. So this is my question to all of you. So NIHR have stopped using the words such as hard to reach, marginalized, underrepresented, etc., etc. The key word and the language we all need to use is underserved. And I really like that term, because when I first started working, a decade ago, everybody would say it's really hard to reach these people. This group of individuals, they just don't engage. And it was always onus on the groups and communities, whereas underserved to me means we are not serving well. We are not reaching there. So that it completely flipped the coin, and I really like that word. So how do you actually identify underserved group currently in your themes, in your practice? What does underserved group looks like? So just let's give an example. I work in kidney disease. Let's say Amy is working in cardiovascular disease, and Gemma, you're working in children's. Do you think our underserved group is exactly the same? Or would it be different? So I can see the nod. It doesn't look like. So Gemma, what's your underserved group in children's? I mean, children itself is an underserved group, isn't it, in terms of research? It takes about, I was reading somewhere that it takes about 13 years for the drug therapy discovered in adults to actually go to the children's, and children's are future adults. So we are actually, we need to sort the children's out. What do you feel underserved within your broader children group would look like?
Yeah, exactly that. You took the words out of my mouth. So much of our work is just trying to get research into children's. It's massively underserved. I think it's only 5% of all health research goes to children, never mind child health technology. So it's don't ask me for the reference for that. I've no idea what that is, but we use that a lot. But yeah, it's a huge issue, and because of that, we are starting to try and work a lot more with schools and trying to recruit kind of more diverse groups that way, rather than the parents that know about research. And I'm not saying we do it completely well, but we're trying to kind of look at this issue and underserved community of a group of children that are being homeschooled, because schools cannot, serve the needs that they have, particularly if they're diverse, or even some of the disabilities that we work with. They've chosen to become homeschooled because they just have identifying other issues with that strategy. So we're constantly learning, really. But yeah, I'm really glad for opportunities like this to kind of learn from other people and see what they're doing.
Thank you, Gemma. You were breaking a little bit, but I think we
got
we got the sense that the children are underserved, but also approaching the school, because you can of course go to the special needs school, you can go to different types of schools to actually increase that. Yeah, thank you. And I think one of the point I was trying to make is the life course of illness is really important. So as a kidney doctor, I don't really just want to work in adult areas, because there's a lot more we need to do through the life course of an individual. Amy, sorry, I've been waiting patiently.
No, fine. I mean, I absolutely don't work in cardiovascular, but I would probably take I would take sort of an educated guess, I suppose, in the sense of, and probably cross-cutting a lot of this and feeding particularly into sort of a discussion around equity, would be sort of around deprivation as well, and people sort of people living in deprivation, the various other factors that often come alongside with that, sort of then presenting at healthcare services later as well, and sort of then thinking about, well, if they're presenting at services later, then how likely are they actually to get involved in research? Because that's sort of taking it a step further, isn't it? And I think sort of like thinking about the NHS strategy and the 3 key points of that, and that one sort of moving from hospital to community service provision as well, probably will help with some of that as well. But I think deprivation and sort of the associated challenges in that area are cross-cutting across all areas, therefore making people underserved.
I think you're right. The deprivation is probably one of the one that is cross-cutting across all of us as an underserved community. I totally agree. And some of us may have slightly different one. So one of the ways I look at who the underserved is for research in nephrology. Oh, before I get that, I guess I need to talk about our HRC, which is a surgical theme. So you could see the underserved group in a surgical pathway varies at different pinpoints of the journeys, right from referral, access to service, to pre-op assessment, from monitoring intraoperatively, but also post-operative recovery and discharge. I'm not going to go through all of this in detail, but just touch point on a couple of things. So access, we already said individual deprived, social deprivation. We also know Black and South Asian patients also have delay in, for example, joint replacement surgery, despite comparable clinical needs. So the question is why within that surgical pathway at different time points we have issues. So for example, female, the risk stratification are predominantly developed in male, but are also applied in female. So that's where the inequity comes in. We also learned in COVID pandemic that measuring oxygen pulse oximetry is not good, as it underestimated, oxygen requirement for darker skin individuals. So you could see within the technology space, whether we are using AI to risk stratify, whether we are using technology and digital technology for referral diagnosis, that we need to be mindful in terms of example. I'll just quickly take through an example that I've got involved. So when I was doing health equity fellowship, I learned a really simple model called 3I model. So 3I stands for identify, gain insight, and then intervene. So identification needs to be data-driven. Of course, within the caveat of how good the data is, because a lot of the characteristics that we would like to tackle, such as disability, is not very well documented. So that's one of the challenge. Even ethnicity, for example, isn't complete picture. So within that caveat, you need to work on how well you're identifying using the data and the limitation to define the underserved. Once you identified and defined, then you need to really gain some insight as why are they underserved? Talking with them, talking with the professional group, trying and understanding the barriers and facilitator. Because without getting insight, no point in putting together an intervention with an industry partner, because those two eyes are really important before we go into intervention stage. For me, the way I identify whether we are inclusive or not is by a simple ratio, that is participation versus prevalence. I do not like comparing how proportion to general population, but the general population doesn't have kidney disease. There are high risk people who have kidney disease. So, or same thing with any disease that you are working on. So please do not compare the proportion that you recruited in your clinical trial, proportion that you recruited in any study with general census population, because that's really wrong. Just to give an example, in kidney disease, if you look at the waiting list for kidney transplant, 33% are from ethnic minority waiting for a kidney transplant. But the general census of UK is 18%. So you're going to underestimate your inclusivity if you're going to compare that with census. So what does PPR means? So the graph on the right side, you can see I looked at the data for 10 years, from 2013 to 2023. We looked at 4 characteristics that were easily available in our data set: the age of individual, sex of the individual, ethnicity, self-reported, and IMD. What we found was there was a huge variation. Ideally, the ratio should be 1 because you're treating them fairly and equally. But you could see on the top slide, if you look at the ethnicity, 20% more white colleagues are participants. And if you look at the bottom line, the green Asian, it's almost 60% less. So that just gives us a benchmark as where we are in the clinical trials since 2013 to 2023. And then I'll show you in a minute that we made some changes. The other thing I'll say is if you even apply this just on overall service, it's not good, because within the renal service, depending on what treatment they're getting, there is a huge variation. As you can see the bottom slide, if you're a dialysis patient, if you're a transplant patient, or if you're a general nephrology patient, again, there is a huge disparity. So what I'm trying to say is underserved group, you can't define overall as a theme, and you can't define overall as a service. You need to define that underserved group for a context specific, the research that you're undertaking. So anything else, I'm afraid, is a lazy approach. So what have we done in renal service? We've done quite a few things, as you can see over the years. One of the things we have been focusing is on staff. We now got a diverse group of staff from Africa, from South Asia, and we try and match. So if you're going to approach a patient who's got a language barrier, cultural barrier, faith barrier, yes, of course, you can try and improve yourself, or you can try and get some help, but often we are resource constrained. So what we try and do is matching those needs, because if you look at NHS, we got plenty of that diversity within our staff. What is missing is that matching. We are almost in a situation where we made it difficult because our diversity in frontline and diversity in research is very different. We need to do something about it. We need to not only have frontline staff in ED as diversity, but we also need to have that in research setting, the research nurses setting as well. So that was the first thing we did. The second thing we looked at is simple, cheaper way of sort of working it. We invested £800. We used an iPad and language line that gave our colleagues a little more way to engage and communicate, and we've been using this in randomized control study, even complex artificial intelligence AI studies we've used. We've also made sure that these activities are not just piecemeal, that they are a continuum, that we are actually at all levels, we are engaging with colleagues. So we've been doing a lot of stories, social media. We helped the bioresource to give a case study and a video to promote research when there was a South Asian Heritage Month or when there was a Black Month. We actually engaged them. So nothing to do with the kidneys, but that's not the point. The point is we actually help where we can. We've also had podcasts so individuals can read, and we decided that our focus needs to be community engagement initiative, not PPIE. Because we can then actually transform the communities rather than the PPI we found was quite challenging in the sense of not able to engage the right people. Often we will find a retired pensioner, old individuals actually participating in that. So trying to get to those socially deprived individuals, those younger people, had been a challenge, and we got that around by, you can see through a number of community events, whether that's a mosque, temple, gurudwara, community centers, our research nurses, and we went there. And not only we went there to talk about kidney health and research, we participated in occasion of joys. We had henna on our hand, we played with the colors, and they felt, all the barriers were broken. They were not longer seeing us as NHS colleagues or doctors or nurses, but actually having a meal with them, enjoying that time. And often all of these activities are in the weekend and evenings. No point in doing PPIE or community engagement event when everybody wants to be at work. It's a little extra mile one has to go and go where you can actually interact with bigger and larger individuals, and those will become our messengers. And we are seeing that that things are slowly changing, because often this will take a lot of time. So coming to the second logic model, that group that I discussed, they focused on collaboration. They really feel that you need to do a little more, not just transactional activity, but actually building those relationship with the grassroots communities, doing focused annual gathering, but also formalizing partnership. Now, often, when it comes to inclusivity, we can work with what we call as VCSC, that's social enterprise for money, or we can actually build our relationship directly with the communities. And I suspect we need to do a bit of both, really. We got lots of individuals like Emory, other, social enterprises that we can directly work if we don't have those relationships. But what I find quite interestingly, when I was working with a company called, I think, Agility, who actually helps a lot of NIHR and NHS to help inclusive research, they actually used to come back to me saying, can you actually signpost some patient? I said, well, what are you actually doing then if I have to signpost? And what I've learned is we actually better that we make our own database and we actually interact with our communities, because that is more sustainable rather than using this middle person approach. It works, middle person approach, if we don't have time or resources. But I really think moving away from that tokenistic, we need to, and transactional, we need to move more relationship things. Interesting. I'm just going to go through a couple of more slides before we go to the next question. So staff engagement is really, really important. We just completed a 3C survey of 3 services that are involved in kidneys. So adult service, pediatric service, and transplant service. We send the 3C survey, which is looking at capacity, capability, and culture. So culture of research. And you can see the staff really take pride in what they do. There is a strong desire for them to help patients to go into clinical trials. They see that that's actually part of their identity, but they are not able to do that because everybody are overstretched. Everybody are focusing on clinical need, and that's often the immediate priority. Nobody gets a protected time. So I do a lot of clinical trials as a PI, but I don't get any protected time to actually do that. So what does that mean? Why is there a big discrepancy in our vision that we want to really make this research for all, but then actually not valuing the research activity same like clinical activity? Because we know without research, clinical care is not going to improve. So we are stuck a little bit. I'm having a lot of conversation with R&I staff that something got to change here. Otherwise, colleagues are not going to participate in clinical trials. They're not going to be a PI or sub-I because they just don't have any more goodwill left. And as you can see, a lot more strikes are happening. And this is going to increase, and the goodwill model isn't going to work any longer. And those are similar themes, really. In terms of the patient also, there's quite a lot of tokenism that has happened over the years in terms of their involvement. And you can see it's a big continuum. But what we are trying to do now is we're not doing research for them, but we are doing research with them. But that is still very aspirational, I'm afraid. A lot more needs to happen where we can have a co-lead from patient who is also representative, a patient co-lead who actually matches the area that we want to improve. So hopefully that will move. So coming back to our own accelerated surgical care HRC, so that's our PPIE sort of Progress Plus framework. We want to capture a lot of variables, and we had a discussion in our HRC research inclusion subgroup meeting as what characteristics we need to capture, so it's not overwhelming for them. It's so that it doesn't affect their own trust. Now, certain groups, if you're going to go and ask about the gender as what your sex was at the birth and what your sex is now, they will feel that not okay. But then that is still important. So how do you actually tailor some of these questions that are important for context per se, not just because you want to collect the data? The last thing you want to do is there is already a big gap in the trust, and then you're asking questions that are not relevant at all just because we want to do this. I don't think it's needed to do. So we need to really align what we are measuring, they are meaningful, and that it helps us for the work that we're doing. So that's the key one. The third logic framework, and I'll share these slides as well, is about communication. Because a lot of times the community feels that NIHR or infrastructure are very transactional. They just want to come when they need something. We need to change that perception. We need to actually, the efforts that we're doing is we need to show that we are actually part of the communities. Using your staff that are connected with the communities that you are struggling or the one that you want to make change is really, really important. But also when somebody from the community lands on your web page, that also needs to look inclusive. It needs to have the health literacy side of things, the readability side of things, but also the cultural annotation. It needs to be representative of the population that you're serving. So this is another example, a case study from a work that we did, which was looking at decision-making of choices of surgeries. So when you have kidney failure, you decide either you go and ask for a living kidney donor as a friend or a family, or you wait on the waiting list. So we wanted to really understand why people are choosing to wait and not go and ask their loved ones to donate a kidney. Of course, quite a complex issue. But what we wanted to make sure is we're not just going and interviewing patients from number point of view. We decided at the start of the study that half of these people will be female, half of them will be male. We decided that a third of them will be individuals who have live donor, a third of them deceased donor, and a third of them still waiting. We decided that a third of them should not be English proficient. As you can see, Urdu and Punjabi, almost 37% of them were non-English speaking, and we wanted a good age distribution. So this is all pre-decided. We call them as purposive sampling. And then Dr. Ahmed's photo in there, we worked really hard with the staff, with Bradford and Leeds Center to achieve that. So that's what I mean by purposive sampling. You decide what your group is going to look like before the study analysis happens. And then you work really, really hard. At the bottom, you can see the IMD deprivation. So we got individuals, almost 47% from IMD 1 to 3. These are the most deprived people. And we wanted to understand the the second I in 3I. We wanted to get the insight why individuals are making the decisions that they are making. How can we get that surgery sooner and faster and live donor kidney transplantation? So that was one of the case study that focused on a specific area. You'll be thinking, so how does health equity actually translate in a scale and a bigger region? So I'm giving you another case study. So this was funded by NHS England Health Technology Adoption and Acceleration Fund. We got £500,000, and the task was, we need to adopt the technology and we need to accelerate across the region. So we focused on West Yorkshire, which is about 2.5 million people, and about 80,000 individuals have got chronic kidney disease. That's roughly 4 to 6% of our population. We were given funding to test a technology at home. And we were very confident, because since COVID, people are quite used to do technology at home, poking sort of in the industrial and then analyzing the COVID. Remember that COVID antigen test we all used to perform at home, and the color changes. So this particular test was a V sample, that color will change, and then you scan it and you send it and you get a result whether you got a protein leak or not. What I want to show you here is this was a limited 12 months project. It was very ambitious, aspirational, to recruit 30,000 patients. We met with a lot of challenges, including GP strike, because this is working in the system. You need to be quite a lot of people on board. So finally, we actually were able to get 23,000 individuals, where we send about 22,500 test kits, and about 14,000 people perform the test, so 63%. Now, these individuals were chosen because they not had a test for a year, despite GP reminder 3 times. So these are not anybody. These are the individuals who are not engaging with healthcare. 14,000 individuals, and 63% of them undertook a test. And we found about a third of them already had markers of kidney damage, with about 4% very high abnormal. Now, why is this important? Well, it's really important because if you look at the dialysis, which is very expensive treatment for our taxpayer, about 1 in 5 start dialysis without knowing that they had kidney problem. Here we got a test that we did at a system level, and we detected almost 5,000 individuals kidney at risk. What we wanted to make sure, 2 things really. At the very outset, we said this project is not any 14,000 people or 30,000 people. It needs to be equity weightage. What does that mean, equity weightage? That means that technology needs to go to individuals who are at highest risk. If you look at the 14,500 people, 22,500 people where we sent the kit, nearly 18,000 kit went to IMD 1 to 5. Nearly 10,000 kit went to IMD 1, the most deprived individuals. What was interesting here is, despite choosing the most difficult one, we had similar uptake, 60 to 65%. We had similar across the IMD, geography, sex of the individuals, in terms of reach, uptake, and the results. So it can be done. But what we need is, at the very outset of the study design, we need a real commitment, a real purposive sampling, whether that was a small study that I showed by Dr. Ahmed, or whether a large study that I showed you here at a system level. And it is possible, working collaboratively with colleagues, it is doable. I just want to give another case study before we go into discussion. This is I'm involved at a regional level. So remember, that was West Yorkshire, and now we talk about the whole Yorkshire and Humber. And this particular project is focusing on what we call Miss Me, which is about making improvement in the services for meaningful equity. And the 2 words here, shaping and meaningful. And this is the reason I'm emphasizing is, often we do things to get the books look good, but it needs to be meaningful. If you're putting that effort, it really needs to help them. So missed appointments consumes a lot of resources in NHS, and we wanted to, our services are really struggling in terms of appointments. So the key question is, who are the most affected one? And you can see here in the same characteristic, but one of our colleagues said actually the clinic distance or a hospital distance from home might be important. Okay, let's look into those individuals. The second question is, what are we trying to do really? Are we trying to make improvement 10% for all, or do we want to have different proportion of improvement based on equity weightage? What I mean is, if you look at missed appointments or DNAs as they call, missed appointment is more common if you're IMD 1 to 3. If you're going to have a success measure, which is same for IMD 1 and IMD 10, then actually you're not working on principle of equity, you're working principle of equality. So I've been able to convince my regional colleague that you need to decide overall what's your improvement goal, 10%, but the most disadvantage you need to double. So if your DNA or missed appointment rate is 5% or 12%, and if you want to reduce that by 10% for most deprived individuals, you need to be by 20%. So that is what equity weightage means, just giving through some of the example. And it's really important that we do a meaningful measurement, not just any measurement, because otherwise the inequality will remain. And what we really want to do within the renal space is we want to be a center for diverse, inclusive research. And you can see we made our name over the last few years, and a lot more studies from NIHR are coming to us in Leeds because they got the news that we got all the processes, the staff, the mechanism to actually help improve underserved participant. We are having the benchmark. We are continuously learning that. We participated in something called research inclusion sort of network study, Leeds, Bristol, and Luton, and you can see that Leeds stood out in terms of how we adapted culturally to help recruit the patients, and we are helping a lot of other studies to improve the recruitment. So my final question really is, inclusion should be everybody's job and not a specialist agenda. I personally don't like this champions called research champions, but I would like to have some thoughts from colleagues. Do you think this should be a specialized job and one research champion in each theme to actually do? How many of you think research champion is also a tokenistic approach? Am I just being provocative here? Apologies if you're passionate about developing research champions. I really think that's a tokenistic approach. Anybody want to disagree with that?
No, I agree.
So within our BRC and HRC, BRC, one of the key objectives was to develop research champions in each theme. And I said, well, why should it be a job of a champion? It should be a job of everybody to do research inclusion. What we need to ask is all the leaders and everybody, what have you done? Rather than actually spotlighting on this poor research champion who doesn't even get any resource to do any project to then say, what have you done? I think that it needs to be everybody's job rather than just one. So I don't like that personally. I would like to know case study and spotlight on people who have done well on inclusivity rather than one person's job. That's my way of thinking. So it shouldn't be a specialist agenda, really. It should be for all. And just last few slides, it should be business as usual. This is not a specialist business. It needs to be across all activities, not just in one project because of the funding thing. It needs to be a proportion of your funding, infrastructure funding, should be for inclusivity. It needs to link with a purpose, and the purpose needs to be not any individual, but it needs to link with the most disadvantaged or underserved in your group. And the other thing I really get annoyed is we capture the data at individual variable. I've told you that ethnic minorities are underserved in kidney disease, but not an ethnic minority like me. I'm well educated, I'm hopefully well off. a doctor. So if I become your PPIE participant, am I actually making, the sense? Am I the type of person that you want to recruit if you want to sort out the problem of underserved? So intersectionality is really important. When I say ethnic minorities are disadvantaged, yes, overall they are. But if you then do intersectionality analysis, if an ethnic minority from IMD 8 to 10, so well-off ethnic minority, have no disadvantage compared to the white Caucasian. It is about thinking intersectionality, thinking about the sex of the individuals, the female ethnic minority, the one that are unemployed, the one that have language barrier, are the one that are affected. So please don't give me some data saying how good your PPIE is inclusive just by numbers. I would like to see on the intersectionality, who are on the table and how they're representing and helping you to sort out the problem. And when it comes to the research design, I really encourage you to think about equity weightage. You need to actually try harder to not only, match the proportion of your census or match your proportion of your clinic, but even more, you need to do more to actually get those people. Because if you can sort out those problems, you will save a lot of money for the taxpayer that can go back into research side of things. I also urge that you have a lot of social assets. What I mean by that is your staff from diversity, the same type of patients that you want to tackle, you have similar staff, whether they are from socially deprived background, your band 4, band 5, band 6 staff, they are living that health inequity. Please empower them, involve them, so that they are your asset. It's really disturbing that the type of underserved group you're describing, we got enough of our staff, but they're just not where they can help us. And final thing, if you're doing an outreach event, please don't be transactional, because they're not stupid. They know that you come there because you want them to participate in a study or give an idea of something. It needs to be on relationship. You need to be part of that, be part of the community. So each communities do have an agenda to improve the health. So go there and solve that problem before they solve your problem. And that's what I mean by sustainability, sustainable partnership. So I'll stop there. I've just gone over my time. Hope that made sense and been useful. I don't think I would say that I have fully sorted oiled machine that helps health equity, but those are some of the thoughts of the most challenging group. And you can't sort out all the groups in one go. You just have to go with the next big approach, rather than try and sort out the whole health equity spectrum. So yeah, any thoughts or any comments? Is that good, Pfizer? Oh, yes.
I was just going to say, it's really, really interesting. I think what you said about methodology is really so important in getting it at that early stages, that it's built into the design. I've not really heard of how that kind of targeted approach could work on a practical basis. So I think sharing that learning across individuals would be fantastic. And I was just going to ask about the research champions question. Obviously, you've done some amazing things in renal in your services. Are you able to share how you've approached things within other disease areas in your hospital that have been able to take it on, almost like a large group of champions together? Because if they know how to do it, then that could help in other areas as well.
No, absolutely. That's really important. So one of the things I've not mentioned, I'm part of the Leeds Teaching Hospital Health Equity and Public Health Board. So each hospital has that board, and you might find like-minded individuals coming together and sharing that experience. And actually, I've learned a lot, to be honest, just being part of that network. So each of us are trying to do things and almost end up reinventing the wheels. And this is what I really would say, lift and shift, copy and paste. Just you don't need to redo all of it. I think one of the really good resource in the reference I've given you, Oxford BRC I've got a really brilliant page on resources and framework that's in the reference I'll share. I'm sure we all have a page of resources. I think the HRC network, perhaps we should all just pool into one so we don't end reinventing. I think that would be great one, really.
That'd be fantastic.
Amy, please.
Thank you, and thanks for that as well. It was a really good session. I think I've sat in a lot of sessions like this and I've sort of come away feeling like I've got nothing to take away from it. But I think from this I actually do. So thank you for that as well. But I think you've sort of raised two things which I think are important to sort of explore further, and perhaps we can explore them as sort of NIHR leads. But I think there's sort of the points you're making about relationship building and sustainability are crucial. As somebody who gets a lot of requests, which are, can you get me a diverse PPI group in a week? With nothing more than that. I think people really underestimate the importance of relationship building, and within that as well, thinking about what exactly is meant by diversity, which you've alluded to well. But I think the second point I'd make as well, and it's similar to what you're saying about research champions, I do agree with what you're saying in that area, because I think when you have research champions, it's a good model, but it needs to be more embedded. It should be, like you say, it's business as usual. But I think we have got other sort of ways which we are encouraged to do, and things that we're encouraged to do, which are not necessarily going to get us the diversity and representation that we need. So I think similar to how you feel about research champions, I feel that way about co-applicants as well. Because, and I'm not saying there's not space for co-applicants, there absolutely is, but I think if you pay so much emphasis on this, you end up just attracting the same type of people. And, you know, those people are great. They've got valid lived experience as well, but they don't necessarily have the lived experience that is truly needed as well. But I think the role of co-applicant is also, it's not an inclusive way of getting people involved either. So I think we need to perhaps start pushing back a bit and thinking about how we can look at other ways to involve people.
No, absolutely, Amy. You're spot on, and this is something what I try and do when I'm going to a community event. I always try and pick the individuals from those communities to share their lived experience, not the same people I use. So even when I'm planning the community engagement event, it's a lot of thinking that goes in. We speak to the community leaders. Come on, I'm sure somebody has got a kidney failure and had received kidney transplant. And they're like, okay. So they do a little bit of work. Then I spend some time that what do I want to do? Because actually, when you go to the communities and if they see their own members talking about things, they immediately connect it, rather than me playing the broken record of why kidney disease is important. If it comes from their own member, it is amazing that connect happens very quickly. So I rarely use the same case studies ever again. You know, even if I'm going to the same community next year, I will try and do a different one. In a way, I guess it's easier for me because I'm just focusing on kidney disease and I can call on to my patients in my day-to-day life. You know, when I see them in the clinic, I also ask them, am I okay to approach you in this? And they say, well, I don't speak English. I said, well, that's even better. You know what? I want you to speak in Urdu in this community. I just, you know, that's my part of my routine life that I capture and concern them in day-to-day life. So I've got a database now. So where I'm heading, Amy, is then my other colleague will ask me, oh, could you give me those PPI? And I say, no, I'm not giving them. Not that I'm possessive about it. The worry I have is like exactly you said, you get a week notice and then these individuals get a week notice and that actually affects the trust. They just feel that you've been tokenistic. You know, I understand why you know, people almost think later on, but it doesn't give good impression of us, does it really? If you are just going to give such a complex thing a week notice. So this is why I do not share my case studies, my patients with anybody. Not that I don't trust them, but I just want to really, you know, almost protect them. because I don't know how a PPIE manager, for example, Hanif is a great guy, Amy, don't take me wrong, but Hanif knows in Leeds Teaching Hospital that Sunil will not give all the names. And I told him, I will give you context-specific patients. You tell me what study you need, I will absolutely happy to signpost. I'm not giving all my PPIE database, so you interact with them. So that might sound not very collaborative, but actually, there is no one approach, I'm afraid. There will be individuals that I feel doesn't mind contacting, and they can be in the general database, but you do need to make effort to protect those individuals that you have developed that rapport and trust. So perhaps I've not come across very collaborative there, Amy, but that's mine.
No, I completely agree, and I do the same as well. I'm very protective because I'm like, no, we've worked really hard to build up these relationships, and I'm not just going to hand that over to anybody. So I completely agree with that. I think, yeah.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm conscious of time. I'm happy to stay, but otherwise, Fraser, shall I hand over back to you?
Yeah, thank you so much, Sunil, and for everyone for really, really good discussion here. Yes, this will be available for you to look back on after. I think, should we keep it as that, Sunil, or do you want to send out the slides?
I don't mind. You can have slides. Nothing.
Yeah, brilliant. And then I can get that sent out to everyone. And if you want to share with other colleagues that might be interested, you can forward on to those.
Excellent.
Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.